During May of 1861, political tensions were rising, and rising fast in Wilmington. The tensions were triggered by the secession of North Carolina's neighbors. In the streets of Wilmington, people milled about as usual, Samuel Finn being one of the many. He was headed out of town back to what used to be his family's farm. A while before Samuel was born, his parents bought a farm on Town Creek, about a quarter of a mile out of Wilmington. When Samuel was born, his mother passed away while giving labor. Then he was raised by his father until he was 14, when his father caught yellow fever and died. Samuel was on his own from then on. His father left his farm to him. He was lucky enough that his father taught him how to farm and raise cattle, chickens, and goats. Samuel was walking into the yard of a small farm. The man was now 18 and kept to himself. The only person that he really ever talked to was Mr. Buckley, the owner of the only market in Wilmington. Samuel had been working with him ever since he joined his father on the farm. Samuel sells and trades with Mr. Buckley. They trade crops and seeds. Samuel sells his chickens, and occasionally he will sell his goats or cattle. And if he does, he saves the money from the animals. Samuel has never needed to use this money, but he keeps it just in case of an emergency. Samuel headed out to the barn for the animals' afternoon feeding. He opened the doors to the barn and walked directly to the back. The buckets were pre-filled like every other afternoon. Taking them in hand, he walked to the goat pen and dumped one bucket onto the floor. Chickens were next, and he did the same for them. After he refilled the buckets, he went out to the cow pen. They were lucky to be having a nice spring, so the cows could feed on the grass. Samuel opened the gate and walked in. He continued walking to a rather large cow. The cow was getting old and needed too much attention that Samuel couldn't give. Samuel was going to bring the cow to market today. He tied a rope around the neck of the cow. He locked the cow out of the pen and into the barn. It stood in the middle of the barn as Samuel walked around him with a brush. After he finished brushing the cow, he took the rope and it followed behind him. They walked on a path along Town Creek. Samuel got the cow to market and found Mr. Buckley. "Hello, Mr. Buckley," said Samuel with a smile. "Hi, Samuel. What you got for me today?" Mr. Buckley questioned. "I have brought you a steer that I've been telling you about the past few days," exclaimed Samuel. Mr. Buckley walked around the cow examining it. "Looks like a very healthy animal. Enough fat," he told Samuel. "How does $35 sound?" Samuel was ecstatic. He hadn't had a payoff like this in a while. "It sounds great. Alrighty. Why don't you bring the cow this way so he'll be in the shade? You can tie him off on the tree." Samuel tied him to the tree and walked back to Mr. Buckley, who was counting the money out. "Always a pleasure doing business with you, Samuel. Never a disappointment." "Thank you, Mr. Buckley. The pleasure is all mine. But I have to run before it gets dark out." They said goodbye, and Samuel tucked the money in his shirt. Making no time to stop to talk to anyone, he made his way to the trail. When he got home, he closed the doors of the barn and made sure all the gates were locked. After all of his night chores, he gathered wood from the massive wood pile. The wood he had in his arms he carried to the house and set on the porch. Then he went inside and lit a candle and brought the wood inside. He proceeded to stoke the fire. The room lit up. The room was rather small, a bed on the far wall, and a table and chairs in front of the fire. In between the bed and the table was another table. There were many plates, glasses, and silverware alongside a rusty stove. Samuel had a small portion of beef with some corn for dinner in front of the fire. Before he knew it, he was drifting off. He jerked awake when he heard something crack. It had come from outside, so he went outside to see what happened. He was thinking someone was trying to break in. It had just been a branch of a tree that had split from itself. Samuel went back into the house in a daze and went straight to bed. The next morning, Samuel had no idea what he would be bombarded with in town. When he came into town, he saw crowds and crowds of people. When Samuel got to market, he blurted out, "What are all these people here for?" he asked with great enthusiasm. "Oh, North Carolina is deciding whether or not there will be seceding from the Union tomorrow. I'm sure surprised that these people have just shown up today, though. You would have thought they would have shown up weeks ago." "Why haven't I heard about this?" Samuel questioned as he looked about. He saw Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, and Braxton Bragg, another important commander. "Well, when you come to town, it's for short periods of time, so you don't get to talk to many people very much." Mr. Buckley's words made perfect sense to Samuel. Samuel nodded, but before Mr. Buckley could continue conversation, he ran back to his house. Thoughts were racing. What do I do? I don't think I want to stay, or do I? I don't have any friends here, so I have nothing to lose. What do I do with the animals? Where do I go? By the time he got back to the farm, he had half his plan figured out. He was to sell 2 of his cattle, save 2 for the journey, sell all but 1 of his goats, and sell half of his chickens. His plan was very smart, because with the money that he has saved and the money that he will be making, he will have more than enough to start a new life somewhere. Samuel's plan was to load the large wagon that his father built before he got sick with the goats, the chickens, and any undesirable things that could be sold. He did as his head commanded. Before he knew it, he was strapping the cows to the front end of the wagon and walking them to town. When he got there, he wasted no time selling the animals to Mr. Buckley. Samuel took a small amount of time to look up to see all the men in town. They were everywhere. Mr. Buckley was very impressed with the animals and told Samuel that he was very, very lucky that his stock was small on everything, so he would get big bucks for this load. Samuel was given $70 for the cattle combined, $40 for all the goats, $35 for the chickens, and $15 for the mishmash of the rest. He came up with a total of $160. That meant he had a total of almost $500 over all the years. "Thank you so much, Mr. Buckley. I have decided to move to New York, start a new life there. Maybe find someone to help me. Thank you so much." Samuel then handed Mr. Buckley a wood carving of a tree. "My father carved this after the first time I met you, so I thought as a thank you for being here for me one time my father, I would give this to you." He looked down at his hands and teared up a little bit. In soft, sobbing words, "Thank you so much, Samuel. This means a lot. Both you and your father were amazing people. Thank you for sharing this with me." They said their final goodbyes, and Samuel raced back to the farm. He was packing up and moving his life from North Carolina to New York, so he packed his chickens in a cage he constructed and then set them on the wagon. He led the cattle into the barn by the goat for the time being. Samuel continued to load the wagon with the rest of his personal belongings. He was lucky to have had enough room to stock a nice pile of wood. He left plenty of room for the bed to fit on the back of the wagon. But for tonight he was done. It was just before dusk, so he took the wood remaining on the pile and brought it inside. He started a fire and ate his dinner in peace. He would be leaving in the morning.